welcome back to Highwaymen Social. Today we're doing something a little different. I'm going to be your host, Emily Holman, and I'm sitting down with a group of my peers, and we're going to talk about the Highwaymen art movement, kind of young people's place in it, and everything that goes along with that. So I'm going to let everyone kind of introduce themselves. I've got Leah.
Hi, my name is Leah Troglin. I'm an auctioneer assistant. I do what we call the meat and potatoes of Manor Auctions. I do the behind the scenes work. I'll speak a little bit more about that later in time.
Nice, turning big rocks into little rocks. My name is Steven Saley. I'm in Lakeland, so I'm not actually on the Treasure Coast, but I am a collector in Central Florida. I've been doing it for probably about 8 or 9 years now.
My name is Walter Fletcher from LaBelle, Florida. Inland of Fort Myers, about 30 miles. Out in the country. I've been collecting for about 4 years, and that's primarily what I do. I've sold a couple paintings just to buy bigger paintings or buy better paintings.
Mm-hmm.
Don't we all?
Yeah. So my first question is kind of what got us all involved in this, because when we look at the Highwayman market, it's pretty much dominated by an older generation. So I mean, how'd you guys get started with this, being younger people in this market?
So for me, I would say I actually first started because they really just needed the Vanna White roll at each auction, someone to kind of walk the paintings. But I grew up around the Highwaymen. My whole house is kind of stocked around with Highwaymen and everything. My parents were born and raised in Bureau, and so I think it was really special to me almost to be closer with the story and closer with my parents growing up and everything, just the origin of their story. I think it was just a cool experience.
And you grew up here?
I did. I was born and raised in Bureau. Okay. And so I think that I also kind of, correlate a little bit more. Like when I see scenes, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I've grown up and I was like, I've been there my whole life. I was, I hung out there my whole life. And so it's really, really cool, that part of it for sure. And then as time went on, I eventually, worked my way into being here and all the time. And so I love it. I just love it. I would, I love everything about it. I love working alongside Paul and Lynn and everything and hearing about it more. And even the clients that we have, hearing their experiences with the Highwaymen, hearing their experiences with buying and selling, and like you guys working alongside you guys and hearing you guys' experience, super, super cool.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. When we were coming up with a list of young people to have on this show, it's a pretty short list. And of the four of us, three of us really got our start in the auction world. When I first started, I had just graduated college, and I've got a degree in history, and I came to work at Manor Auctions, and the first person I met was Steven, and Steven kind of showed me the ropes of the auction world and how it all worked. How did you, you're actually significantly younger than me, which I didn't know until 5 minutes ago. But so when we met, you were probably 18?
Yeah, that would have been, I came down, I was actually up in Tallahassee at the time. That was, even prior to that, I got my start when I could barely see over the showcases selling gold and silver to Paul way back in the day. And at that time, I just was a kid who saw cool things, antique things, and if I thought I could make a buck on them, I'd flip them. And I remember being in high school and Paul saying, you should come work for us. And I was like, well, I'm like 14, so I don't really have a lot of time for all that. But when I do get into a place where I can, I'd love to come work for you. And I remember basically when I first started, one of the first major consignments I had was a collection of Highwaymen paintings. It was from a pretty major collector who was a Florida photographer. And he had a large group of probably 20, 30 paintings that came through. And at the time, it was kind of, I was doing what you were doing, which was, here's this pile of stuff, figure out what it's worth, and write it up. And so I remember doing the history behind it, seeing the story, and being infatuated with it. And ironically enough, back then, it was like, a good Herald was like $500. A good Alfred Herald was $300.
I look back on it, and it's crazy when we first started.
Yeah, and you see that kind of stuff, and of course, again, I laugh now because back then I was like, oh, I'll never be able to afford one of these. Like,
right.
I was like a first-year college student working my way through, taking night classes, just trying to make money, and I was like, it'd be really cool to be able to buy one of these one day, but I would never be able to buy one from the auction.
Right.
I remember I bid on one, and it went for like $150, and I lost it. I was like heartbroken.
Yeah.
But it really started, the first one I ever found was at a Goodwill in South Florida.
Oh,
and
nice.
I took it up to Tallahassee where I was at the time, and showed it to my uncle and his CPA firm. And Tallahassee is a little bit far removed from the rest of Florida. And a little old lady walked in and she goes, "Oh, is that a Highwayman painting?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, it is." We joked about the story and stuff. And I was telling her, like, "I just found this, I just got it back." And she was like, "Well, would you ever sell it?" And I was like, "No, I've really, really wanted to find one of these for a long time. I don't think I can sell it." She was like, "What's a crazy number to you?" And I was like, "I don't know, $1,000. It was a little Hezekiah Baker. It was like an old upscore painting, but it was, I don't know, at the time worth $200.
Right.
I was like, "I don't know, $1,000. And she wrote me a check right there for $1,000.
So that was probably exciting.
It was exciting, but it was also heartbreaking again, because I was like, I just found one. But that had made me like want to go find more. And as we saw them come through the auction house, started to learn more about the artist, what to buy, what not to buy, what kind of sold. And then I kind of continued through that. And honestly, some of the major, Highwaymen paintings, the record-breaking paintings that have come through Manor from years and years ago, I remember when they came in, and specific ones like the $20,000 Alfred Hare porch scene, point scene. I remember that being like, oh, this is real. Like this like really big.
It was really
stuff.
interesting to see the start of it at Manor.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I feel like in 2018, we didn't have nearly as many as they have now.
Oh no.
But maybe 10 or 15 in auction, like a 23-piece collection. We didn't get a lot of these back then.
It was wild, and I remember just again being around it and getting to be fortunate enough to be around it at a young age through Manor was pretty much how I got my start.
Yeah. Walter, what about you?
Well, I kind of started a little late, about 4 years ago, right when the values were going up. So I was buying them for pretty high, and I've still been buying them for pretty high.
Yeah.
But I was buying to collect to decorate my home. I just bought a condo, and I had stuff from like Home Goods, just kind of generic artwork, just hanging on the wall, and I wanted to buy some paintings that reminded me of home, reminded me of LaBelle, reminded me of where I grew up. And there's a guy in Okeechobee I was buying a painting from, and he told me about the Highwaymen. And I had no idea about him, so I went home, did some research, and found it to be pretty interesting, and then I started collecting from there, and that's,
Did you buy mostly private, or did you go to a lot of auctions?
I didn't go to any auctions yet.
Okay.
I didn't start coming to auctions until about 2 years ago.
Okay.
Maybe a year and a half ago, yeah.
Okay.
What was your first
everything's
one?
Private. It was a monochromatic Gibson.
Oh,
it was
cool.
it was like I thought I had, found the Holy Grail. It was, of course, that's probably with any, collector, when they first start out, you buy the cheapest piece you can find, thinking it's the best one, but
Hey, those Gibsons are not that bad.
They're not bad. No, I agree.
They get a lot of hate, but
Yeah.
I think there's something special about them.
They're a good
too.
starter piece.
They're
Yeah.
It's
definitely
definitely
will
like
say-
Gibson's own little personal thing.
Yeah.
Like, Gibson once you see the monochrome, so that's true.
I also think with a younger crowd, there's a day in which those black and white ones in particular, I think they fit a really modern aesthetic.
I
And
agree.
for younger people who are not trying to be as flashy or gaudy, it's a little bit more, you could put it on the wall and
I
actually
agree.
could fit. So.
I agree. Anytime I've ever posted on my social media a picture with me with a monochrome Gibson, it is more times that I'll have someone respond to it like, "Oh my god, I love that painting!"
Oh, that's so interesting.
more
It's
times
crazy,
than an eye-catching one that I would particularly go
Right.
for.
Yeah.
So I think that's
So
true.
when you guys have upgraded your collections or maybe sold paintings, who's your who's your audience? Who are you selling to? Is it older generation still? Do you sell to young people? What are you finding out there in the private marketplace?
As far as selling in particular, selling, I know I can say it's pretty much exclusively done to older
Really?
audience. I don't think I've ever sold a painting to a younger person than
Okay.
me. But I definitely do have lots of experience selling to colleagues around my age. In particular, I can think of a couple young lawyers that I know that I've sold some paintings
Okay.
to in Tampa, Tallahassee. There's a few different people that are young professionals, almost the same way as it was with Highwaymen and Bacchus, that it was young professionals who were like, I want to show that I've arrived, and they used to say that it was Bacchus paintings that proved that, and for some people it may be Highwaymen paintings or Harold Newton. I remember.
Is there a difference in types of paintings that those people
Yes.
wanted?
Well, so I have a couple different theories about that, and I used to call it the wife and the husband test, where it was like the wife usually wants a painting that just looks good on the wall, and the husband wants the painting that's older with a better story.
Right.
So newer, great example, older Harold's is right up the husband's alley.
Mm-hmm.
Newer ones is, more of the wife test. It's pretty, it's Technicolor if it's on the
That's
wall.
really interesting because I feel like some of the older heralds, like he emulated Bacchus a lot. So I'm surprised to hear that, honestly.
Yeah, I'd say for younger people, I have seen paintings, like again, my sister who's 30 and she loves the crazy like Demps and like Chicos and like the really bright ones. But then again, the young lawyers and friends that I'm thinking of, they like the older, like, richer palette knife stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. What's your experience with
So I haven't done a whole lot of selling. Most of my
Okay.
stuff just went to auction. It was the easiest thing for me to do. Yeah, it wasn't. I didn't want to kind of get into the dealing world.
Yeah.
It was a lot of connections to make, And I started coming to auctions recently, so I didn't make a lot of connections early on to get rid of my stuff. So it was just easier to send them to auction. But
For sure.
the people that I have sold to have been older. There's been nobody my age or even younger than me that have wanted to buy one. Even if if I introduced them to the group, the Highwaymen told them the story and stuff like that. They're still really not. They're not interested, even if they have the money.
Why do you think that is? Like, why is there just such a small group of us? Why are more young people not interested, do you guys think?
I think it's an age thing. I think we'll grow into, we're kind of not an anomaly, but
a little bit.
In a sense. But once you have been done well in life, invested well,
Yeah.
you have
You have to have a little bit to play with.
Yeah, some
So it's
extra income.
financial.
Yeah, financially,
might be
it's
that.
kind of a fun thing to do probably once you're retired, which most people in here that are buying, during the auction are retired, and it's a neat event to come to. It's a social event, so I think it'll happen with time. But for young people to get involved, it's good, but it's probably the same across any type of market. It's going to be a small group of young people, and then later in life, people when they have. That extra income, it's a lot easier to play with then.
Yeah.
I think I think there's probably three main reasons. The first one is our generation is very transient and we're not big collectors. We're not big on, I can think of just being in the auction industry and antiques in general, how many families that I've talked to that just go, oh, well, the kids don't want any of it. And it's just because our generation is very different than a lot of the generations of the past. I think that's a big one. I think just a lack of awareness, honestly, is a big piece of it. That I've noticed that when I tell people about the story, they're like, "Oh, I love that. That's so cool." Like they just didn't know. And then when they do know, it's like they're like, "Oh, I really like that one. Like that Herald is really good." I'm like, "Yeah, your taste is maturing." I've seen that with family and friends that used to know nothing about Highwaymen, and they see one when I bring it home, and they'll be like, "That one is really good." I'm like, "That one is really good. You are right. That one is better." And then I think the last one is, like you said, financially, you have to have something to play with. Fortunately and unfortunately, because they used to be so inexpensive, you now are at the point where there are barriers to entry for people to even buy their first painting. You can get a $500 black, but most people, when they look at it, they go, "Well, I don't want the all black." Right. So it's like they would love a Sam Newton for $500, but you can't do that. So you just need all three of those factors: the awareness, the financial ability, and to have an appreciation outside of our transient nature, which is just like IKEA furniture and just like move on.
I know,
with the
isn't
next
that sad?
thing.
Oh my gosh.
It's very different. But.
I find it interesting, whenever I talk about art with someone my age or someone I know, they're interested, right? And they look at the paintings, and I was with friends and family. There was a party at Manor Auctions, and we were looking around the room, and one of my friends was like, "So what's it cost to get into one of these?" And I'm like, "Well, which one?" And they're interested, but as soon as you start telling numbers, no longer interested.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree, definitely.
I wonder how we can expand it, because I've been using social media, right, with like this show to try to reach new audiences, and that truly is my goal with the creation of this is to market to new collectors, because if you grow the collector base, you grow the value. In my mind, that's how I'm envisioning it. So what do you guys think about social media and like the important, do you guys use social media in this market? Like, is it beneficial to you? Do you think there's a benefit to putting this kind of information out there? What do you guys think?
I think even similar to, like I said, and kind of with how Steven said, like with people's lack of awareness, like even with me, like I was saying earlier, how I will sometimes post like when we have an auction, I'll post, me holding the painting on social media, and it'll make people immediately start to ask about it. I think it is like a lack of awareness, but I also think that like social media does really, really help to like reach that crowd that probably wouldn't have came here without maybe seeing it. You know what I mean? Or maybe have even thought about that on their Saturday without seeing a post about it, you know what I mean, on their social media. So I think, it reaches good crowds too, in that way, just to help the exposure of it all around.
Right.
And I mean, I know that they use different sorts of social media even, to advertise when they're doing, selling on their own, private selling and stuff. So, I mean, I think all around it's a good thing for the Highwaymen. Yeah, it's a good way to, kind of explore it more for people that don't explore it so much in the real world.
Right.
Yeah,
it's interesting. A lot of the older generation we were talking about earlier, they use the forums, right, to communicate. Like you go onto the Facebook social media forums and they're all talking and conversing, but I personally feel like there's like a wall as soon as I started putting this stuff out there. That's really interesting, like a little bit of a lack of acceptance from people that have been around in this market for a long time. It's almost like gatekeeping information, and I wonder why that is. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think the gatekeeping piece is part of it. I think almost, in essence, keeping it like a hometown story is like we love our pride here in Florida, but also it'd be unreasonable for us to just be like, we're going to keep this story just here. Like we want it to grow, and obviously it deserves to grow. And I think without the use of social media, it's almost as antiquated as us selling paintings door to door. Like it's that same idea of the Highwaymen used it and it was great for a time, but there's obviously an evolution of marketing and advancement and information to go, that worked, but maybe there's a better way to do things and maybe there's a more efficient way to do things. I think in general, and we see this all across the spectrum from business to art to everything, the advancement of technology has not been super easy for a lot of generations because it's so different and it's so wildly new and it's uncomfortable in some ways to have to learn, but it's undeniable the amount of benefit that it sees that you can, again, create a content video like this and it can be seen by thousands of people within a matter of minutes.
Yeah.
Whereas if you really want to keep it local, you can. I just think it's a disservice to the story.
Right. I hope that this kind of thing will grow and people will be more accepting of it and share the information.
Yeah.
Because if we can share the information, then it benefits everyone.
Yeah.
That's always my goal. So do you guys feel like a responsibility as this small group of younger people to like keep this going, like to spread it? Do you guys feel that responsibility? Because I definitely think I feel somewhat responsibility to like keep spreading information and keeping the movement alive. Do you guys have that same inclination?
I think for sure to at least just like when people are in here and I have the chance to be able to talk about it and be able to share my knowledge on it, I think it is really good. And I think also even to the older crowd, they enjoy, honestly, the younger crowd being involved and hearing about it too and everything. So even being able to formally educate people that are in the older crowd that aren't educated on it, I mean, it's all around, it's a...
Still bringing new people in, even if it's not...
Yeah, even if it's not just my generation, I think that it also benefits both ways.
Yeah.
Both.
Yeah.
I think, we were talking about this a second ago, I think one of the most beautiful parts of being involved in the Highwaymen world is the story is so rich that we don't have to work at all to spread it. Like it just spreads itself. It's got such a good story. I was thinking back on when we first met, and I feel like most of us, if you are in the Highwaymen world, have very similar stories. We probably had never talked to each other, but our first phone call was probably an hour at least. And it's just like, you just get on the phone with somebody who shares an interest in such a specific and cool thing that you can just like connect with people. And so for me, I don't feel like I have to carry it because I know the story is just infectious enough and you can talk and talk and talk to tons of people about it. I think as far as the younger generation goes, it's like I know people will care about it if they just hear that first thing. In particular, in my sister's shop, I sell more more books than paintings because the story to young people, they can affordably buy a book, obviously, which is great.
Yeah.
But the information just gets out there, and even just seeing the cover of Catherine N's book or Gary Monroe's book is like, oh, I'd read that. Like that's a cool painting. Like what's that red tree? You know, something like that. And so getting it out there is the first kind of step that I think we're charged with. But the story carries it to the finish line. We don't have to work at all for that. It's got enough history involved that there's a reason we all watch these videos and connect over this stuff. So.
Yeah. So has the movement, I know for me it has the movement shaped like your career goals? Like do you guys see a change in where maybe you would have gone and what you're kind of focused on now with the strength of the movement and the popularity rising? Like do you guys see yourself using this as a career move going forward?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I've always told Paul from the beginning, I just absolutely love the Highwaymen story. I mean, I love everything about it. I mean, it's just so cool to be around. I mean, I can't express in words enough like how much I love it, really honestly, but I mean, even just being here is my favorite thing to do, even just being surrounded by these paintings. You know, it's a really cool thing.
With being like the behind the scenes girl now, which me and Steven used to do that kind of thing too, do you mostly see Highwaymen paintings or do you still get to kind of see other things too?
Oh, I definitely see other things too. I primarily see Highwaymen paintings, but I definitely do see other things too. You know, just it'll be like the mixed media arts, you know, kind of like the prints, you know. We even see prints of the Highwaymen as well that'll come in, you know, that are not just only the paintings, you know, the palette knife, all of, you know, the fun things that it's known for, you know. We also see, you know, the back.
It's so interesting how the auctions have changed. Like when we first started, I just remember Paul would come in and I would just be sitting on my desk and he would just put this giant tub of jewelry in front of me with like a slip of paper, and I'm like, what? And there's like 200 pieces of random fine jewelry pieces that I have to like sort through and
measure and weigh.
Oh my gosh, that was one of the first things Steven had to teach me was like how these different tools worked, and I learned so much about other things from the auction world too that kind of shaped what I do in my spare time. I can't tell you how many times I've run into Steven.
When I first started, actually, I started with doing ceramics. We had like so they basically had texted me one day and they were just like, we got a bunch of ceramics in. I had no idea what I was in for.
What kind of ceramics?
Yadro, a lot of Yadro, like covering the whole floor out there, and it was all of the things, Florence, you know, just all Armani, like it was just everything. And so I actually first learned how to get into the auctioning world not with the paintings, but first with like that.
I catch myself looking back at that time, and like when I see a Yadro out in the wild, I'm just like,
don't make me.
Just get away from me. Like there were times where we would have truckloads of this stuff. I don't know if you came to town for that one time. We had an entire truckload of Disney ceramics. You remember that?
I think that was just after my time, thankfully.
Lucky you. Oh my god, it was a nightmare. We used to be in the space down the hall, and we had a whole wall just full of these ceramic things that I had to go through one by one. It was a nightmare.
In that ceramic pile, there was also a bunch of Disney, there was a bunch of all that stuff too, but I mean, it was a fun learning experience. Like I would do it again. I wouldn't do it with as much ambition, but I would definitely do it again, and I would still have a really, really good time with it.
Yeah.
But now it's the same thing too. Like when I'm talking out loud, you know, to people that are not here, and I'll be saying, oh, I work at an auction place, and it'll be someone of the older crowd that'll be like, oh, do you guys work with Yadro? Let me just tell you about my Yadro collection. I'm like, I'd love to hear it.
It's such a popular collectible. People go out and bring them home from their vacations. There's so many out there.
So many, and that's a big story too. But that was what I first started with, and then it was really quick after that I started learning about the Highwaymen and started going into that.
So you kind of, Steven, started in the auctions like I did, and then now you basically, do you work for yourself basically?
Yeah.
You turn it into a career?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a dealer, I will say, but I have gotten to grow so much in that. I started with a lot of other things, coins, like probably most kids do. Start out collecting, then did watches, and I've done a lot of stuff with Manor. Like you said, it used to be far more eclectic than it is now. I love how refined it is now because the Highwayman world can come into one single place and see hundreds of paintings. But I remember cataloging a flag from John Wilkes Booth or from JFK's booth car, and seeing that sell for $100,000.
I remember that.
I remember cataloging like mastodon teeth and
Yeah.
Submariner, like a tropical dial Submariner for any watch heads out there that sold for like 80 grand. Like just all these different things that I loved seeing the different sides of things. And Highwaymen were just a piece of that, but to see it become much more refined, I always had an appreciation for a lot of art and stuff. So I still do all the other stuff on top of the Highwaymen.
I've run into you a few times.
At thrift stores and random places like that.
It's hilarious. Well, Vero has a very good potential for resell, right? So yard sales and thrift stores. I run into Steven at least a few times looking at like jewelry sales and stuff like that. That's something I picked up from the auction industry. It's just such
Once you know, you can't unlearn it.
You can't help yourself but to look at those things when you're out and about.
Yeah.
So do you guys feel like we're riding a wave? Like, is this a wave of collectability on this Highwayman that you think is going to end? Like, where do you see the future of this? Do you think it's something that's going to last for years and years to come, or is this like a fading trend?
No, I think it will. It'll continue forever.
Forever? That's what we hope,
Until
right?
the paintings disappear, yeah.
Yeah, there is a finite amount of them, so it'll be
Obviously, there'll be recirculation of them, but yeah.
it'll be interesting to see how those values evolve. I know in my brief time, they've gone from, like you said, only a few $100s to thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah, I think if you also look at like the overall trend of when it first started in the 1990s with the early Titans kind of uncovering the stories, the Jim Fitches, the Gary Monroes, the early collectors, the early dealers, you really do see numbers that represent crazy amounts, even for back then. I mean,
Right.
Alfred Hare washerwoman painting selling for 20 grand, Harold People painting selling for 50. Like there was sustained numbers, and we've seen the ebbs and flows between recessions and between the market rising and falling. If you've been in it for longer than a couple months, you've seen that.
Right.
And I think the idea that I've always told people, and obviously this affects everything, you buy the paintings when you start out, like you said, the cheapest ones, you buy what you can afford. But that's how you get in the door, and then almost everybody top grades and works their way up to different paintings. And you buy your first Al Black, buy Willie Daniels, you sell your Willie Daniels, get a Sam, sell the Sam, get a Harold, and it's like, you do see that, and I think as long as that occurs, there's always going to be entry-level people, and there's always going to be top-level collectors as well. I mean, the scarcity is really what brings value to a lot of things, and for those of us who have swam in the waters for a while, you realize the scarce stuff is like, it's the top. Like, when you find it, you're like, I gotta buy this.
Yeah.
And I'd sell the 10 Sams I have to buy that one Harold.
Right.
And so as long as that occurs, I think that will always sustain growth in the market, because there's always going to be people who are buying, or even a Tracy, or they're buying their first entrance into it, and then once they do that, that sustains the lower end or the beginner paintings, and then beginner paintings sustain the higher end paintings. That's how markets grow. I think the way that the market matures has always been that way. You can see that in coins, watches, stamps, Yadros, whatever it is, and that idea is pervasive in the highway market. It's still in its infancy, I think. I mean, 25 years in a market is next to nothing for most antiques and collectibles.
Right.
Like, comparative to a lot of other things that go back hundreds and hundreds of years of people collecting. I think that growth continues, and I think the appreciation continues as more people get involved. So.
And I think for hopefully young people watching this, if I can get it out there to young people, that's probably good advice. Start with something like an Al Black or Ronnie Demps, which you may look at and be like, but I want that one.
Yeah.
It's a good way to start, and practicing that, upgrading your collection like you guys do.
I know a lot of people have different opinions about second generation movements. I don't personally sell any, but I do have a huge support for it, because I think what a lot of people had problems with, even in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, was they looked at the Highwaymen and they were basically like, you guys are bastardizing Bacchus's like greatness and just like, you know, you're making it a cheaper version, and they were just guys trying to make money. And so even when I see the second generation people, I know there's some people who are like, well, I don't collect second generation. It's like they're just doing what their parents did. They're just trying to make money. They're using who taught them to create it. And I think there's always going to be a place for people our age specifically who go, I can't buy a $2,000 Sam Newton, but I could buy a $200 Tracy, or I could buy a Mark Stanford, or just, you know, there is Florida on your walls is Florida on your walls.
Yeah.
That's what people want. And I think before they get to a Sam Newton stomaching that price, they have to be like, I want a little poinsettia next to that one. And they're like, I want something else. And that's how you build that. So I think starting, like you said, with a second generation or a cheaper one, an Al Black, a Ronnie Dems, you get your foot in the door.
Yep, definitely. Well, thank you guys for sitting down with me today. And thank you guys for watching. And we'll see you guys next week with another episode.